Assalamu alaikum. So I want to share with you that the path of Ar-Rasul, the path of the messenger, is the path of the Qur'an. The Qur'an is the path of the messenger. And if we look at chapter 25, verses 27 to 31, we can see this clearly. This is one of the places in the Qur'an we can see this clearly. But in this place, I really like how it phrases it and draws our attention to it. So let me share that with you. So here it starts off in verse 27. He says, وَيَوْمَ يَعُدُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِ اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا. So he starts off by saying, and the day when the wrongdoer will bite at his hands, or bite upon his hands, and will say, woe to me, would that I had taken a path with the messenger. So this section starts off with talking about taking a path with the messenger. Then it says in the next verse, Ya waylata laytani lam attakhidh fulanan khalila. It says, woe to me, would that I had not taken so-and-so as a close friend, as a khalil. So it starts off saying, would that I had taken a path with the messenger, and then says, I wish I had not taken so-and-so as a close friend. Then what did that close friend do? لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. He led me astray from the dhikr, from the reminder, after it had come to me. وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِلْإِنسَانِ خَذُولًا. And shaitan is ever betraying the human being. So before we read on, there's more, but before we read on, I want to highlight this point, because this context starts off saying that the wrongdoer will say, would that I had taken a path with the messenger. But then the context continues to say, when he took this other person as a close friend, what did the close friend do? It led him astray from the dhikr. So look how the words here, ar-rasul and dhikr, are kind of used interchangeably. And we actually find this same dynamic in another place in the Qur'an, which is chapter 65, verse 10 and 11, where he says, قَدْ أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكُمْ ذِكْرًا. Allah has sent down to you a dhikr, rasulan, a messenger. So see how dhikr and rasul are used interchangeably. And then it says, يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ. So the dhikr, which manifests as a kind of messenger, and the bee is trying to attack me, what does it do? يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ. Recites the ayat of Allah, mubayyinat, which makes things clear. And in Surah Sad, which is chapter 38, verse 1, the idea of dhikr is tied again to the Qur'an. It says, Sad wal Qur'ani dhid dhikr, which means Sad, and by the Qur'an, dhid dhikr, that the Qur'an that possesses dhikr, one of its characteristics is dhikr. Another place that ties the Qur'an to dhikr is chapter 20, verse 113, where he says, وَكَذَلِكَ أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. And likewise we have sent it down as an Arabi Qur'an, وَصَرَّفْنَا فِيهِ مِنَ الْوَعِيدِ. And we distributed in it different warnings. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. So now he tells us the purpose. Perhaps they may have taqwa, أَوْ يُحْدِثُ لَهُمْ ذِكْرًا, or it might bring about a dhikr for them. So going back to chapter 25, verse 27, the wrongdoer will say, Ya laytani ittakhadhtu ma'a rasuli sabila. Woe to me, would that I had taken a path with the messenger. And then in the next verse, would I had not taken so-and-so as a close friend. Then, لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ. He caused me to go astray from the dhikr. So the path of the messenger is equivalent, and as we see from these other verses, is equivalent to the idea of dhikr, which is equivalent to the Qur'an. The Qur'an is filled with dhikr, and the purpose of the Qur'an is yuhdithu lahum dhikra, that it will bring about for them a dhikr. And then, if we keep reading in this context from 25, 27 down, the context further supports that, because he says after that, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ. And the messenger will say. So the context starts off with, would that I had taken a path with the messenger. And we can see how the messenger and the dhikr are connected, and the dhikr is connected to the Qur'an. But if that wasn't enough, right in this very context, the messenger is going to say something. He's telling us the messenger will say something. So he says, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ. And the messenger will say, Ya Rabbi, O my Lord, Inna qawmi ittakhadhu hadha al-Qur'ana mahjura. He will say, "Oh my Lord, my people have taken this Qur'an as a thing abandoned." And the reason I translate it like that is most English translations are going to say, "My people have abandoned this Qur'an." But that's not quite what it says in the Arabic, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. But before I do, I just want to focus on this point, that the context in this surah, in these ayat, starts off with talking about taking a path with the messenger. With the messenger. And then a couple verses later, it tells us what the messenger is going to say, what he's going to lament, what he's going to complain about, is that my people have taken this Qur'an as something to be abandoned. So then, if we put that together and it's right in the same context, what is the path of the messenger is the Qur'an. And our abandoning the Qur'an is abandoning the path of the messenger. Now, what's even deeper about this context is it doesn't just say my people have abandoned this Qur'an. Like, it doesn't use the word abandon in like a verbal sense, like a past tense verbal sense. It doesn't say hajaru, they abandoned. It says ittakhadhu, they took the Qur'an mahjuran, as something abandoned. Now, the beauty of that to me is it's telling us that we're doing these two paradoxical or contradictory things at the same time. We're not just abandoning the Qur'an, we're simultaneously taking it and abandoning it at the same time. And that, I feel like that perfectly describes our situation as Muslims. We have the Qur'an, we read the Qur'an, we might keep it on our shelf, right? We might kiss it. All these different things, we respect it. But do we really take it in a deep sense and really study it and really follow that as our path and apply it to the practical daily things that we go through in life? And in my own personal experience, we don't generally. We generally study and focus on a lot of other things outside of the Qur'an. And that's not to say that studying those things is wrong, but it's just to say, what will the messenger complain about? And what is the path of the messenger? What the messenger will complain about is the abandonment of the Qur'an. And what is his path? Is the path of the Qur'an. So we have to focus on that more. And then if we look in the next verse, he says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ عَدُوًّا مِنَ الْمُجْرِمِينَ. And it is like that we make for every prophet an enemy from the criminals. Like that. They sometimes translate kadhalika as likewise. But if you break the Arabic down, the kaf is for tashbih, for comparison, and dhalika means that. Ismul ishara lil ba'id is the noun of pointing to something far. So kadhalika, like that, similar to what we just talked about in the previous verses, is how we make for every prophet an enemy. So how would we apply that to the Prophet Muhammad? What would be the enemy of the Prophet Muhammad is anything that takes us away from the Qur'an. So enemy doesn't have to be, if we think about it in a deeper spiritual way, enemy doesn't have to be like a physical enemy. It could be ideas. It could be the way we think about things, the way we perceive things. It could be anything that takes us away from the Qur'an and from the path of the messenger. So the path of the messenger is the path of the Qur'an. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.